For 99% of human history, life was hard. For most of that 99%, it was brutally hard. We were pushed to the limits of our endurance. We faced the hungriest predators and the harshest environments Earth had to offer. Life was an endless struggle to get out of bed, find food, find shelter, defend ourselves against other predators, defend our turf from other humans, dodge disease, death, disaster. And yet there is nothing more precious than life. And what is more remarkable than a life forged in such conditions? Hello and welcome to this course, a learning experience. As you know, our species has been around for about 2.5 million years. And until relatively recently, life was tough, really tough. For most of our history, the story goes like this. We are a resourceful, highly adaptable creature who survived multiple ice ages, who mastered tool-making and fire-making, whose population spread across the globe. Our ancestors ventured into every niche and cranny of Earth, surviving on every edible insect, every fishable fish, every huntable mammal, however big or small. We mastered the use of weapons and warred endlessly with other human groups. If there was anything to be said about our species for most of our existence, it is that we are tough. We adapted, evolved, and persisted despite countless dead ends, extinctions, and disasters. Okay, but let's ask a question. Was life really so simple? Take a moment and think about what you have to do to survive. Think about everything you need to get done each day, and then imagine doing all of that while learning the intricate details of your craft. Imagine doing all of that while trying to innovate and improve your situation, pushing forward and not falling behind. All of that is hard enough in the comfort of a modern home. Imagine having to do it outside, naked, vulnerable, threatened by extinction, by starvation, exposure, injury. That's the kind of environment we grew up in. And yet, we still innovated. We still pushed forward. And frankly, I don't think we've ever been the same since. So this course is different from any course I've ever taught before. Because it's not really a course, it's an investigation, an exploration, an homage to that. I want to show you what I'm talking about. After 1 million years of struggle, of simply fighting to see the next sunrise, something extraordinary happened. We began to create. Not for survival, not for utility, but for something else. Something deeper. We see it deep in the caves of the world, far from the reach of the sun. Not in the living spaces, but in the sacred, hidden chambers. A handprint, outlined in pigment, a magnificent charging bison, painted with breathtaking skill and observation. Why take the time, the energy, the precious resources to do this? This was the inner flame, first sparking to life. This was the mind, no longer just solving problems of survival, but beginning to process the experience of survival. The art was a language beyond words. It was a way to say, I was here. This is what I saw. This is what filled me with awe and terror. It was the birth of storytelling. Not just recounting where the herds were, but telling the story of the hunt of fear, the triumph, the respect for the spirit of the animal that gave its life. This was how knowledge became wisdom, how experience became culture. The struggle to live had given us stories to tell, and in telling them, we began to understand ourselves. But the world was still a terrifyingly unpredictable place. Why did the herds sometimes not come? Why did a good hunter sometimes fall ill? The mind that could plan a hunt and paint its story now sought answers to the biggest questions of all. Why? What is my place in all of this? This is where ritual was born. We see evidence of careful, ceremonial burials, with tools and flowers placed alongside the body. This isn't just disposal. It's a signal of belief, a belief in something beyond. Perhaps they danced to call the spirit of the rain. Perhaps they wore masks to embody the animals they revered and relied upon. These rituals were a technology for the soul. They were a way to exert a sense of control over the uncontrollable, to find meaning in the randomness of a harsh world, to process the grief of loss and the fear of the unknown. This wasn't a retreat from reality, it was a profound engagement with it. The struggle had forced us to look outward for solutions. Now, we began the even more complex journey of looking inward. We began to build a world not just of resources, but of meaning. So what is the final product of this million-year forge? What is the ultimate legacy of all that ice? All those predators? All that social tension and loss? It is not just our upright bodies or our large brains. It is the human spirit itself. That stubborn, indefinable drive to push through, the resilience that allows us to get back up after a fall, the curiosity that drives us to explore new lands, both physical and intellectual, the hope that allows us to plant a crop, even in a drought. That feeling you get when you face a difficult challenge, today that knot in your stomach, that urge to persevere that is not a modern invention. That is your ancient inheritance. It is the echo of an ancestor staring down a winter-esque freeze and deciding to build a better shelter. It is the whisper of a storyteller by a fire, ensuring the lessons of the past were not lost. The forge of struggle did not create a perfect being. It created a resilient one, an adaptable one, of being capable of great compassion and incredible creativity. You carry that forge within you. Every time you choose to endure, to care, to create, or to hope, you are honoring that legacy. You are keeping the inner flame burning. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wait a minute, you're telling me that I'm just a product of circumstance. I can't help but be a certain way. I can't help but have certain tastes and proclivities. Frankly, I agree. In some sense, we are products of circumstance. We are shaped by our upbringing, our socioeconomic status, our culture, and yes, we are highly adaptable. And yes, we learn to overcome the circumstances we are given. But I don't think it's quite accurate to say that we are only that. I think something happened in those caves. That spark that ignited. I think we gained an internal thermostat that set our temperature higher than our environment. I think we found a way to tell stories to ourselves. More important than our DNA, more influential than our instincts. We have the ability to interpret our experiences, assign them meaning, and move forward accordingly. That means we can always turn toward the light, no matter how dark things get. It also means that none of us will ever have the exact same story. Each of us is marked by a unique set of events, losses, challenges, and triumphs. And each of us must forge our own path from the inside out. The legacy of struggle is an invitation to reflect on where you are today and how you got here. I want you to consider what challenges you have overcome and what obstacles you face. How have they changed you? What skills have you learned? What values have you embraced? Have you found ways to adapt and thrive in spite of adversity? Most importantly, what stories have you told yourself about these experiences? Stories of victimization or stories of triumph? Because your story matters. It becomes part of the larger story of humanity, which is a story of resilience, of adaptation, of hope. Your story matters because it shapes your identity, your self-esteem, and your future actions. Just like the artists in those caves, you have the power to shape your experience. You can make meaning out of chaos. You can transform pain into purpose. And you can honor your struggles by growing from them. And now I want to hear your story. Please share in the comments below what challenges you have faced and what you have learned from them. What stories have you told yourself about your experiences? Thank you for joining me on this course, and thank you for keeping the inner flame alive. It is 27,000 years ago in what is today northern Siberia. The wind bites with an icy ferocity as it sweeps across the barren landscape, sculpting the snow into towering dunes. Imagine standing at the edge of this white expanse, gazing at a sky painted with dancing auroras. You are witnessing the spectacle of the Ice Age, a world seemingly so alien that it seems almost otherworldly. It is here, in this frozen crucible, that we encounter the pioneers of the Arctic, the intrepid souls who dared to venture into one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. But what drove them to this frozen frontier? What forces of nature or necessity led them to push beyond the known world into the heart of the Arctic? Or to put it another way, why did anyone ever decide to move to the Arctic Circle in the first place? The answer, as many things in life, is complicated and layered. To be fair, nobody chose to move to the Arctic Circle. Back then, There wasn't exactly a relocation program or a sales pitch about the pristine environment and abundant wildlife. No. Their journey to the frozen north was likely driven by a confluence of factors, each as harsh and unforgiving as the landscape they inhabited. One compelling theory suggests that they were pushed rather than pulled. In other words, they were fleeing something. Perhaps it was the relentless advance of the glaciers themselves, forcing them to seek higher ground. Or maybe it was a dwindling food supply as megafauna went extinct and the climate grew colder. Whatever the reason, this theory paints a picture of a desperate exodus, a flight from the familiar into the unknown. On the other hand, there's the pull of opportunity, the idea that something drew them to the Arctic's bounty. Maybe it was the promise of untapped resources, a land waiting to be claimed. Or perhaps the allure of a simpler life, free from the complexities of a growing civilization. Whatever the motivation, this paints a picture of intentional migration. A conscious decision to brave the frozen north in search of a better life. Yet, whichever theory we favor, one thing is clear. The decision to settle in the Arctic Circle was not an easy one. It meant leaving behind the warmth of community, the comfort of familiarity, and the security of established resources. It meant venturing into the white silence, into a world where the sun barely peeked through the winter gloom, and where every step could mean the difference between life and death. Despite the difficulties, they pressed on, driven by a will to survive that burned brighter than the northern lights that adorned their night sky. Over time, they adapted, learning to hunt the elusive Arctic prey, to build shelters that defied the icy winds, and to live in harmony with the rhythm of the frozen north. They learned to read the language of the glaciers, to predict the whims of the northern lights, and to find sustenance in the harshest of landscapes. And yet, despite the hardships, life went on. Families grew. Stories were told around flickering fires, and laughter echoed across the ice, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. Generations passed, each leaving its mark on the land, on the culture, and in the very genes of their descendants. The Arctic became their home, not in spite of its challenges, but because of them. In the face of adversity, they built a life, a community, and a future, proving that humanity's greatest triumphs are often born in the harshest of environments. For millennia, the Arctic Circle remained their domain, a world apart from the rest of humanity, shaped by ice, solitude, and an unrelenting struggle for survival. Then, after thousands of years, the world began to change. The glaciers retreated, the climate warmed, and the Arctic Circle was no longer the distant frontier it once was. The outside world began to encroach, bringing with it new possibilities and challenges. Some of the Arctic dwellers chose to hold fast, to remain in the frozen north, a testament to their deep connection with the land. Others ventured out, carrying with them the lessons of the ice, the skills honed by a life on the edge. Wherever they went, they carried a piece of the Arctic in their hearts, a memory of the harsh beauty that had been their home. But as the centuries turned into millennia, the world changed again. The Arctic pioneers, once on the fringes of civilization, found themselves at the center of a rapidly evolving world. Their way of life, once celebrated as rugged individualism, was now seen as primitive. Their skills, once essential for survival, were now relics of a bygone era. And their connection to the land, once a source of pride, was now seen as an obstacle to progress. They were caught in the throes of a changing world, struggling to hold on to their traditions and way of life in the face of modernization, industrialization, and the relentless march of progress. The Arctic Circle, once their sanctuary, was now just a memory. Yet, despite the challenges, they persevered. They held fast to their traditions, passing down their knowledge and skills to future generations. They fought to preserve their way of life, resisting the pressures to conform to the modern world. And they continued to connect with the land, finding solace in the natural world that had been their constant companion. The story of the Arctic pioneers is a tale of resilience, adaptability, and courage. It is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even in the harshest of environments. It is a reminder that progress is not always linear, and that tradition and modernity are not mutually exclusive. It is a story that continues to unfold. reminding us that the human journey is one of constant evolution, and that the challenges of today are but stepping stones to the opportunities of tomorrow. As we marvel at the tenacity of these Arctic pioneers, it's important to remember that their story is not just a tale of the past. It is a story that continues to play out in the lives of indigenous communities around the world who are striving to preserve their cultures and way of life in the face of a rapidly changing world. Their struggles are a stark reminder of the fragility of our cultural heritage and the importance of respecting and preserving the traditions of others. In their fight for survival, these communities are not just battling against the elements. They are fighting for recognition, respect, and a place in a world that often seems determined to erase them. The Arctic pioneers are a symbol of hope, a beacon of resilience in the face of adversity. Their story is a call to action, urging us to recognize the strength and tenacity of those who have come before us and to honor their legacy by protecting their way of life and celebrating their contributions to our shared human heritage. Today, as we stand at the precipice of a new era, it is essential that we look back at the stories of those who came before us. The Arctic pioneers teach us that progress is not always easy, and that change can be both challenging and necessary. Their story reminds us that progress does not always come easily, and that change, while inevitable, can be both challenging and necessary. It is a story that compels us to confront the realities of our past, to acknowledge the struggles of those who came before us, and to strive for a future that honors their legacy. Their story is a tapestry woven with threads of hardship, resilience, innovation, and hope. Each thread is a testament to the human spirit's indomitable will to survive and thrive in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. As we continue to navigate the complexities of our modern world, let the story of the Arctic pioneers serve as a guiding light. Let their legacy inspire us to embrace change, to adapt to new circumstances, and to strive for a future that honors the resilience and tenacity of those who braved the frozen frontier. The Arctic pioneers, once on the fringes of civilization, are now at the forefront of our collective memory. Their story is a reminder that progress is not always linear, and that the challenges of today are but stepping stones to the opportunities of tomorrow. Let their legacy be a call to action, urging us to embrace change, to adapt to new circumstances, and to strive for a future that honors the resilience and tenacity of those who braved the frozen frontier. In the grand narrative of humanity, the Arctic pioneers stand as a beacon of hope, a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure and thrive in the face of adversity. Their story, etched in ice and bone, serves as a timeless reminder of our shared journey and the challenges that have shaped our world today. So let us take a moment to pay tribute to these extraordinary individuals who dared to dream of a world beyond the ice, and whose legacy continues to inspire us to reach for the stars, no matter how frozen the frontier may seem.
Nighttime. If the smell was the first thing to assault you, and the sight of decay was the second, then the sound. The sound is what would slowly unravel your sanity. This is not the peaceful silence of nature we imagine. This is a brutal, unfiltered audio track of a life spent on the razor's edge. This is the sound of survival, and it is horrifying. Forget sleep sounds apps with gentle rain. The baseline soundtrack of a prehistoric night was a symphony of human suffering. The wet phlegmy cough from a lung infection that will never be cured. The groan of someone with a chronic stomachache from parasites. The sharp sudden cry of a child, not from a nightmare but from the pain of an ear infection or hungry belly. This wasn't occasional, this was the nightly chorus. There was no Tylenol, no cough syrup, no doctor. Pain and sickness were audible, public, and relentless. Think of the last time you had a bad cold. Now imagine that cough never really went away. Imagine everyone around you had it too. Imagine lying in the dark, listening to your loved ones drown in their own phlegm, knowing there was absolutely nothing you could do. This was the backdrop of their existence, a constant low-grade audio reminder of their own fragility. But the sounds of sickness were just the ambient noise. The real terror came from the sounds that stopped, and that's it. The silence. This is the most terrifying sound of all, because in a world where noise is constant, sudden silence means one thing and one thing only. Danger. A predator is near. Every human and animal in this camp knows it instinctively. Their lives depend on reading this audio cue. This is a fear we cannot comprehend. We hear a noise outside and maybe get a little nervous. For them, a strange sound in the night wasn't a curiosity. It was a potential death sentence. That roar isn't a cool wildlife documentary sound effect. It's the sound of a creature that sees them as food. Their hearts aren't pounding with excitement. They are pounding with a pure, primal terror that has been completely bred out of most of us. There are no locks on their doors, no police to call. Their only security system is their own ears and their ability to be absolutely, perfectly silent. And even in the daylight, the soundscape was harsh. This wasn't a world of polite conversation. It was a world of guttural shouts, sharp barks of command, and cries of frustration. Arguments over food fempe weren't quiet debates. They were loud, physical, and threatening. The sound of flint napping wasn't a gentle tapping. It was a sharp, jarring crack that echoed through the camp. There was no background music to soften the edges. Every sound was raw, functional, and often carried the weight of conflict or immediate need. So let's put it all together. The horrifying, the smell of blood and rot, the shocking sight of a life built on decay, and now, this unbearable soundtrack of sickness, conflict, and primal fear. This is the true first impression. This is the reality you'd be slapped with. We have spent millennia building walls against this reality. We invented soap, medicine, soundproof houses, and laws to create a bubble of silence and cleanliness. We have deliberately and successfully insulated ourselves from the natural world that forged us. And in doing so, we have completely lost touch with what it actually took to get here. So the ultimate horror isn't just the stench, the grime, or the noise. The ultimate horror is the realization of what our ancestors endured, the sheer, unimaginable toughness of the human spirit. They lived through this, day in and day out. They loved, they created art, they told stories, and they raised children surrounded by this constant, visceral struggle. They are not primitive simpletons. They are the absolute hardest of the hard, the ultimate survivors. And we are their soft, clean, pampered descendants. We are living in their wildest, most impossible dream. The first thing you'd notice wouldn't just horrify you, it would humble you. It would redefine your entire understanding of strength, of comfort, and of the breathtaking privilege of simply being born in the right century.
Our world is a rich place. I mean, if you can get past the whole imminent climate collapse and potential nuclear winter situation, there's an astonishing array of stuff. I mean, you could buy a hat just for keeping your ears warm. You could go kayaking because the water's too cold for anyone else to be in it. You could get a root canal. You could sit in a room while someone else tells you a scary story. And all these things, every single one of them, is the result of thousands of years of struggling. Every medical textbook, every weather prediction model, every book of fairy tales, they all exist because of what our ancestors figured out about the world. And that's the most important lesson of our history. We learned that the world makes no sense. And we don't mean that the world is chaotic. We mean that the world doesn't care about us. It doesn't owe us anything, and it will happily kill us. But that knowledge changed everything, because once we understood that we are just here by chance, that we have to claw at this world for every inch of progress, well then, we had to learn how to live with it, and we made the most unlikely alliance, us and the world. We vowed to understand it. We swore to make it bend to our will. And we started with the most fundamental thing of all, making a home in a hostile world. Imagine, if you will, a vast, frozen landscape. A world locked in ice. The wind howls. A sound that's less like weather and more like a predator hunting. And in this world, we've been sold an image. It's an image of a man. A lone, rugged figure. Muscles coiled, brow heavy, a crude stone tool clenched in his fist. He stands against a mammoth, against a saber-toothed cat, against the elements themselves. He is strong. He is solitary. He is the master of his world. But that image is a fantasy, a dangerous oversimplification. The truth of survival 1 million years ago wasn't a solo mission. It was a team project. The greatest threat to early humans wasn't just the giant beasts they encountered. It was the sheer, overwhelming, relentless pressure of an environment that was utterly indifferent to their existence. A single individual, no matter how strong, how fast, how clever, was just a snack waiting to happen. Or a storm away from freezing. Or a twisted ankle away from starving! The real story of our survival isn't written in the strength of a single arm. It's written in the collective strength of the group! It's the story of the first team huddle in the dark against the cold of a world that didn't want them. But a group of individuals isn't a team. Not yet. To become a team, they needed to do something extraordinary. They needed to connect their minds. And this didn't start with complex words. It started with a look, a glance. Imagine two hunters stalking prey through tall grass. They can't speak. A single sound could spook the herd, but one hunter catches the other's eye. He gives a slight nod to the left. A flick of his eyes indicates a direction. His partner understands. He moves. This is the foundation of it all. Non-verbal communication. It was a language of gesture, of expression, of subtle body language. A tightened grip on a spear could signal tension. A relaxed posture could mean the coast is clear. A shared smile over a successful find. That reinforced the bond. This was the original social network operating in complete silence. It was about building what psychologists call shared attention, the ability to know that you are both looking at the same thing and understanding its importance. This silent understanding was the prerequisite for everything that came next. It was the first operating system for human society, and it ran on a simple, powerful code. A shared look, but as powerful as a look can be, it has its limits. You can describe the location of a water source with a glance. You can explain which berry causes a painful death with a gesture. This is where the true magic began. This is where the grunts and calls slowly, over millennia, evolved into something more: language. And with language came humanity's most powerful weapon. The story. Picture the end of a long, hard day. The group is gathered around the one thing that truly set them apart: a controlled fire. It provides warmth, light, and protection. But it also provided the world's first classroom. Here, around the flames, knowledge became immortal. An elder could point to a peculiar rock formation and say, "That is where we found the great bear last season." A mother could tell her children, "The river bends sharply past the old oak tree, and there the water is sweet." They weren't just sharing facts. They were building a map, a collective database. A story about a hunter who got lost and nearly died taught everyone the importance of landmarks. This was the cloud, the original cloud. Not stored on servers, but in stories passed from mouth to ear around a fire that held the darkness at bay. And with this shared knowledge, this collective intelligence, something revolutionary happened. The group could now afford to have specialists. This is a giant leap. It's the moment a group stops just surviving and starts building a culture. Because not everyone had to be a master hunter anymore. If the group's knowledge was secure, if the food was shared, then someone with a keen eye for detail could spend time experimenting. Maybe they noticed that certain clays, when mixed with water and applied to a wound, seemed to soothe it. Trial and error, over time, created the first healer. Another person, with a steady hand and a mind for patterns, might take a piece of ochre and draw on a cave wall. They weren't just doodling. They were creating symbols, maps, perhaps rituals to ensure a successful hunt. They were the first artist. Another might have a knack for napping flint, creating tools that were not just functional, but elegant and efficient. The first engineer. This specialization was a luxury paid for by the collective. It meant that the band's total knowledge and skill set expanded exponentially. The healer's knowledge of plants became everyone's knowledge. The artist's symbols became a shared identity. The strength of the group was no longer just in its combined muscle, but in its combined and now specialized minds. This was our first victory over the world. We built a culture, a web of meaning and practice that helped us endure. But the world was just getting started. As the ice receded, as the continents took shape, as the climate stabilized.
We are all products of our environment, shaped by the world we live in. But sometimes, the pressure of the environment can be so extreme, the need to adapt so urgent, that the result is truly remarkable. Such was the case for our ancestors, who dared to venture into one of the harshest environments on Earth, the Arctic Circle. There they faced the unforgiving grip of winter, the endless blanket of snow, the scarcity of sunlight, and the unfamiliar diet of the Arctic meat. Each of these presented a unique challenge to their survival. Yet somehow they didn't just survive, they thrived. They conquered the Arctic, and in doing so, became a completely new species. Hi everyone! I'm here. In this video, we'll explore how these early humans adapted to the challenges of the Arctic Circle. We'll discuss how they dealt with the harsh weather conditions, the difficulties of navigating snowy terrain, the problem of limited sunlight, and the unfamiliar diet of the Arctic. Through their adaptations, we'll see how they conquered the Arctic and ultimately paved the way for humanity's existence. When our ancestors first arrived at the Arctic Circle, they were met with a harsh and unforgiving environment. The weather was cold and dry, with temperatures dropping to below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. They had to find a way to stay warm and protect themselves from the elements. Fortunately, they had some advantages. First, they were already well adapted to survive in colder climates than the ones they used to. Over generations, they developed thicker skin, more efficient metabolism, and better insulation through blubber or fat. This helped them conserve body heat and maintain a comfortable internal temperature, even in freezing conditions. Second, they brought with them the knowledge and skills they acquired in their previous habitats. For example, they knew how to build shelters using natural materials like rocks and branches to provide protection from the wind and snow. They also learned how to make warm clothing out of animal skins and furs to cover their bodies and keep them toasty. Finally, they had the benefit of their cultural heritage, which included stories and traditions passed down from previous generations about how to survive in the Arctic. These oral histories contained valuable tips on hunting, gathering, and living in harmony with the Arctic environment. With these tools and knowledge at their disposal, our ancestors were able to adapt to the challenging Arctic weather. They built sturdy igloos, sewed warm parkas, and followed the advice of their elders on how to navigate the icy terrain. By combining their natural, technological, and cultural assets, they created a lifestyle that allowed them to flourish in the Arctic Circle. But the Arctic Circle was not only characterized by harsh weather conditions, it was also a landscape covered in snow. This presented its own set of challenges for our ancestors, who had to find a way to move around and hunt for food. Despite these obstacles, they managed to adapt and thrive. To begin with, our ancestors developed specialized equipment to help them navigate the snow. They created snowshoes that distributed their weight over a larger surface area, reducing the risk of sinking. They also invented sleds that could carry heavy loads across the snow, making it easier to transport goods and supplies. Additionally, they learned how to use dogs as a means of transportation, harnessing their strength to pull sleds and navigate the snowy terrain efficiently. They also developed keen eyesight and hearing to spot prey and detect predators. This was particularly useful when hunting animals such as polar bears, reindeer, and seals, which were common prey in the Arctic Circle. They also learned how to track animals in the snow, following their footprints to anticipate their movements and ensure a successful hunt. Furthermore, they developed hunting techniques that were suited to the Arctic environment. For example, they learned how to use spears and harpoons to catch fish and other aquatic animals. They also developed strategies for hunting large animals such as mammoths and bison, working together in groups to tire out their prey before delivering the final blow. Overall, our ancestors were able to overcome the challenges of the snowy terrain in the Arctic Circle through a combination of technological innovation, keen senses, and strategic hunting techniques. But the Arctic Circle's challenges went beyond the physical landscape. Our ancestors also had to contend with the psychological effects of living in perpetual twilight or darkness. The lack of sunlight can have a significant impact on a person's mental and physical well-being. It can cause a disruption in their circadian rhythm, leading to insomnia, mood swings, and even depression. Additionally, the constant darkness can make it difficult to distinguish between day and night, leading to disorientation and a feeling of isolation. However, our ancestors were able to cope with these challenges thanks to their adaptability and they developed cultural practices and technologies that helped them maintain their mental health and well-being despite the lack of sunlight. For example, they may have observed the patterns of the stars to help them keep track of time and seasons. They also may have developed rituals and ceremonies to mark the solstices and providing a sense of continuity and normalcy. Furthermore, they learned to take advantage of the unique opportunities presented by the Arctic Circle. The prolonged periods of darkness allowed for activities such as storytelling and socializing, which helped to build a sense of community and camaraderie. Additionally, they learned to appreciate the beauty of the northern lights and other celestial phenomena that occur in the Arctic Circle, finding wonder and inspiration in the natural world around them. Overall, Our ancestors were able to overcome the psychological challenges of the Arctic Circle by developing cultural practices, appreciating the unique opportunities, and finding joy in the natural world around them. Another challenge our ancestors faced was the unfamiliar diet of the Arctic Circle. When our ancestors first arrived in the Arctic Circle, they were confronted with a new and unfamiliar cuisine. The traditional foods they relied on from their previous habitats were scarce or non-existent in this new environment. This presented a significant challenge as their bodies were accustomed to digesting and processing familiar foods. The Arctic Circle offered a different set of food sources, primarily meat from animals such as reindeer, seals, and whales. These animals were not only unfamiliar to our ancestors, but they also presented unique challenges to process and prepare. Meat from these animals is often high in fat and protein content, which can be difficult to digest without the necessary enzymes and gut bacteria. Additionally, the lack of familiar plant-based foods in the diet led to a deficiency in essential vitamins and minerals, such as vitamin C and fiber, which can cause health problems over time. Despite these challenges, our ancestors were able to adapt to the unfamiliar diet of the Arctic Circle through a combination of biological and cultural adaptations. Biologically, they developed more efficient digestive systems that could break down and absorb nutrients from fatty meats more effectively. They also developed the ability to store and access nutrients in their bodies, allowing them to survive periods of food scarcity. Culturally, they developed new cooking techniques and tools that made it easier to process and prepare unfamiliar foods. They also developed new social norms and practices around food sharing and storage, which helped them to ensure that everyone in their community had access to the resources they needed to survive. Through these adaptations, our ancestors were able to not only survive but thrive in the Arctic Circle. They developed a unique cuisine that celebrated the flavors and textures of Arctic ingredients, and they developed a deep understanding of the animals and plants that grew in this environment. This knowledge allowed them to become expert hunters and gatherers, ensuring that their communities had a reliable source of food. Overall, our ancestors' ability to adapt to the challenges of the Arctic Circle is a testament to the power of human resilience and ingenuity. They faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles, from the freezing temperatures and snowy terrain to the unfamiliar diet and limited sunlight. Yet, they not only survived but thrived, conquering one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Their story is a reminder that with determination, creativity, and a willingness to embrace the unknown, we can overcome any challenge and achieve the seemingly impossible. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.